I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. The minutes were distributed to the members in advance of the meeting. Seeing that we have a quorum, may I have a motion to approve the minutes? Dan?
Moved, yeah.
Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes from the November meeting have been approved. I'd like to start this morning by briefly sharing an update regarding the national opioid settlement. So last month, the State Budget Committee approved our $52 million plan to utilize the 35% share of the state's half of the 2022 and 2023 payments from the national opioid settlement appropriated to the Family and Social Services Administration. And over the last 9 months, our team, along with the Division of Mental Health and Addiction and the Department of Health, have been meeting with stakeholders from the Indiana Association of Counties, AIM, the Sheriff's Association, our community coalitions, community mental health centers, MHAI, ISMA, the Health Association, many providers, recovery organizations, community foundations, and other philanthropy, mayors, commissioners, counselors, and many, many, many more. So in developing our plan, we looked at other sources of funding and activities that are currently taking place in the state and how we can braid together those funding sources and fill the gaps, such as our state opioid response grant, our substance abuse block grant dollars that are at the Division of Mental Health and Addiction, and CDC funding that's at the Department of Health. And one common theme that we heard from our stakeholders, but they wanted assistance in working together within the county and then also regionally across county lines. So we've created a $25 million matching opportunity. And the goal is to encourage collaboration among communities and counties to build connections to the infrastructure that the state has put in place. We're requesting responses from local units of government that have received funds per the National Opioid Settlement Agreement or an entity that has been granted funds from a qualified local unit of government. We want to see innovative, cross-sector, community-driven approaches to evidence-supported programming that builds upon the efforts that have already been made, including but not limited to the expansion of and access to treatment for substance use disorder, stronger connection to recovery supports, and development and implementation of prevention practices. The requests for funding went live this Tuesday morning and will be open through February 28th until 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So over the last 2 weeks, we've held 3 informational sessions for potential applicants to learn more about the process and ask questions. Details of the RFF include details of the RFF, including how to apply, can be found at in.gov/FSSA/DMHA/funding-information. Or you can find the link at our website, in.gov/recovery/settlement. Much easier. This funding will go a long way to building our infrastructure that we've worked so hard to get off the ground. There are many communities across the state working to develop their plans, and I've met with many of them. And I'm glad to say that there's a growing number of communities that are dedicating 100% of their funds, both restricted and unrestricted, to abatement purposes. And notably, Frankfort and Clinton County are part of this group. So when I sat down with these two groups a couple weeks ago to learn more about their plans for the local opioid settlement dollars, a few things stood out to me. One is their collaborative approach. 2 is the needs assessment that they went to understand what they're doing, how they can fill gaps, and where are they succeeding. And then most importantly is the holistic approach to developing the plan and using both the county and the city dollars cooperatively to fill those gaps. And this is a model that many communities across our state could and should replicate. So I've invited Clinton County Healthy Community Directors Laura Archibald, Franklin Mayor Judy Sheets, Clinton County Commissioner Jordan Brewer, and Clinton County Council President Alan Dunn to talk about their plan.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having us. I'm Jordan Brewer, the president of the Commissioners, And I'll give you a little bit of background of how we came about with our kind of collaborative group and committee. And so as many of you know, the commissioners were the ones receiving the information at a county level about the opioid settlements. And so we would receive email updates and about the funding and it coming through. However, many of us were part-time and were not experts in that field. And as the money started to come in, we sat down as a group and decided, how can we best utilize this for our community? And the first thing that came to mind was that we have great people that work in this field every single day. And so I set up a meeting with Laura so we could brainstorm what was going to be the best utilization of these funds for the individuals that needed it most. And so over coffee, her and I started brainstorming a bunch of ideas and eventually settled on creating a committee that would work with both the county and the city. And we felt like pooling our money together was the best use for the individuals in our community that needed it. And so that was kind of our first step. And then we eventually formed that committee and had close to 5 or 6 meetings where they ended up taking all of the suggestions that we had and analyzing those and kind of narrowing it down. So I'll pass it on to Laura now, who will kind of go through how that worked and what we decided to do in Clinton County and Frankfort.
So after that meeting with Jordan, when we had coffee, I actually had a meeting with Judy the exact same day, a transportation town hall, and I saw her and I said, hey, I met with Jordan this morning and we had this great idea to form this committee and do the city and the county together, and what do you think? And she's like, I think that's a great idea, and I think the city and county should work together on this. And I said, so we want people from the city on there too. And Judy's first question is, can I be the person? And I'm like, yeah, you can. So Judy wanted to be the person on that committee as well, as Jordan wanted to be one of the people from the county. And so between the three of us, we decided kind of all the people that needed to have a seat at that table. And so there were people from the city and the county. We felt like EMS needed to be at the table, someone from the city, Frankfort Police Department, someone from the County Sheriff's Department, corrections, community corrections, probation, someone from the health department. Inwell was at the table, and we picked them because they provide substance use treatment, they have medication-assisted treatment, and they do mental health. So we felt like they were a good person to have at the table because they covered all three areas. And then Healthy Communities, we do a lot of work in prevention, and then we also run the peer recovery coach program in our community. So we felt like Healthy Communities was a good person to have at the table on the prevention and treatment side. So all of these people came to the table. We met 5 times, I believe. All of those meetings, I think we had one meeting that lasted an hour, but I think the rest of them all lasted at least 2 hours. And that doesn't actually even begin to show the amount of work that went in, because the amount of work that really went into it was between those meetings in research. So what we did is we literally went through all of those core strategies that you had listed in Exhibit E, and we examined every single one of those core strategies. We went through our community demographics, making sure that we were reaching our underserved and at-risk populations. We went and saw under each core strategy, what existing services did we have? How accessible were those services? How culturally responsible were we being with those services? What gaps were there in the services that we had? And why did we have those gaps? What were the barriers to those services? So we went through literally every single one of those core strategies. And then the things that we didn't know, that was our homework. And we went away from every one of these meetings, and every person had assignments. And so we did the research, and then we would come back to the next meeting and talk about what we found out. And when I tell you we did due diligence, we did due diligence. So things like, for example, when we talked about the nalox boxes. One thing was we knew we wanted to get more nalox boxes out. We had a lot of nalox boxes, but we didn't feel like we had them everywhere that we needed them. So EMS ran overdose reports for us, and then we did an overlay of where the nalox boxes were compared to where the overdoses were. And, you know, it was like, I'm the person who found out where we were putting all the nalox boxes. Why didn't anybody tell me we had all these overdoses over here and there's no nalox box over here? And, you know, so just having all these people at the table communicating actually solved a lot of problems. And so, you know, it's a great model just to have all these people at the table, whether there was funding there or not, just to solve some of these issues. And so that's what we did. We did this very deep dive. We asked organizations for financials. We asked them for sustainability plans. And we felt like that if we were looking to give them funding, that was a fair ask. And they were willing to do those things. And so when I say we did a deep dive, it was a deep dive, and it was a lot of work, but it was worth it to come up with what we felt like was a good, sustainable plan. So we looked at every single core strategy that we had, looking at the demographics, the existing services, the service gaps, and what those barriers were to getting to those services. And so then after we did that deep dive, we made a list of what our gaps in services were, okay? And some of those gaps in services were things that we were actually able to address without any dollars. And that was nice. Like I said, having all those people at the table was really important. And we were able to fill some of those gaps in services just by making those connections. So some of those examples were having the jail there, the Clinton County Sheriff's Department, they talked about not having some services for their men in the jail. And so by having all of us at the table, we have now started a support group 3 times a week for the men in the jail, and Healthy Communities goes in and does that. And they now have a self-referral button on their kiosk where the inmates can refer themselves to Healthy Communities within 45 days of their release, and that lets us know when someone's going to be released, and a peer recovery coach goes and meets them within 14 days of their discharge, and they do a post-release plan, a relapse prevention plan, and they get an appointment scheduled within 24 hours of their discharge to see a system of care navigator. And so what that system of care navigator does is helps them with all of the things that they need assistance with so that they can concentrate on their recovery. What we find out is if you're worried about where you're going to lay your head at night and how you're going to feed yourself and how you're going to get a job, it's really hard to concentrate on your recovery. So that system of care navigator wraps them in services. So they start working on getting a job. We make sure, number one, that when they get released at 12:01 a.m., that they have somewhere to go safe that's not back to the place that they were using prior, okay? So that may be a ride from our Frankfort Police Department who will pick them up at jail and to the homeless shelter, or it may be a ride to a safe place that they have to stay. So we get that set up before they ever get released. And then they have a appointment set up with a peer recovery coach and with that system of care navigator within 24 hours of their release. So that's all happening as a result of these people being at the table together. So those were some of those sort of issues that were able to be solved without spending any dollars. Those were just things by conversation happening. And I think that shows you the power of having the right people at the table. So then after we made this list about gaps in services, some things it was easy to assign dollar amounts. You know how much a nalox box cost, and we knew how many we needed and where they needed to go by doing our mapping. And so it was easy to say, okay, this many nalox boxes at this many dollars, and those were easy to divide between city and county. Well, this many are in the city limits and this many are in the county. So those were easy to assign dollar amounts, and they were easy to say whether it was a city allocation or it was a county allocation. Then other things were harder to assign dollar amounts to, and they were harder to assign, does this go to the city or does this go to the county? But we just made our priorities, and we started going through, and we started just having discussions. How much money does it really take to do these things? And so we started making budgets for things. So one of the things like we felt was a gap was we had no prenatal or postpartum support group for women who suffer from substance use disorder. Had absolutely nothing for that. So one of my peer recovery coaches who had been through that and felt like that was a really important thing, I said, okay, I want you to research that. I want you to come with me with a program and a budget, and that's what she did. And, other things that, we had our recovery residences come to us with a request and a budget and why that amount is. And so people submitted things to us, and we just started going through and prioritizing what we felt like were our top gaps in services. And then we assigned dollar amounts to where we, as a group, what we felt like were the right amounts of money to go to the right things. Then we picked organizations that were going to be overseeing those dollars. And that really was interesting. I felt like it went very well, and there was no issues with that. We only went with organizations that had good histories, had good sustainability plans, or we built things in. So one of our recovery residences had very low overhead cost, but they didn't have a great sustainability plan. One of our other recovery residents had higher over cost, but a great sustainability plan. So we talked to them and we said, here's the deal. We're gonna help support both of you, but your responsibility is to help this other place with a sustainability plan. We need you to help them get credentialing so that they have a good sustainability plan. And they were like, deal. So making sure that we were helping each other and helping our recovery community in the long run. And so those were the sort of things that we did to make sure that this plan helps our community at large. So we went through and decided who the responsible department would be for these action items. And things that, like, I remember when I was presenting to the city and county, I was like, I know this says first responders and maybe the money came out of the county, but it went to Frankfort Police Department. It was just because the Frankfort Police Department had the contact for that training. So I know the Frankfort Police Department doesn't work for the county, but they're the person who had the contact for the training. And that's why the money would go to them. And as a community partner and not a member of government in any way, I appreciated the fact that I got no negative feedback and no slack from these guys on that. Like, they didn't question that. They didn't say anything. They were like, okay, and shook their heads, to be honest, because it was just the way it worked out. And it was a first responder training, which means our city and our county first responders will be there together. And it was just who had the contact for that training, who had already worked with that person or whatever. And so that's how that was assigned out. And then we assigned dollar amounts to it. Then when we felt like we had a good plan here, then we scheduled for the city and the county for me as the representative and the head of community corrections, just because I really don't like public speaking and I wanted somebody to have my back, to go and present in front of our city and county council. And so then I'll let them talk about that a little bit.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say the importance of collaboration between everyone. That's how we accomplished what we did. It wasn't just one group. When we found out we were going to get this settlement, I talked to the Finance Committee for our council, and just to get some ideas. Of course, they had ideas on the restricted, but the unrestricted, they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do with that. So I had asked Laura to come and speak to us after the committee had met. Actually, one of our council members were the ones that suggested that we put together a task force or a group to make sure that we all work together. So then Laura came and gave the presentation, and unanimously, our city council said, yes, we're going to go with this plan. They believed in the people that worked on the committee and what they presented. Myself, on the unrestricted, I wanted to see that go to 180 Recovery, which is a facility for recovery for men, and also We Care, which is a recovery facility for women. So that's where my passion was, my heart was. So I asked the council as well on the unrestricted, can we go ahead and use that for those two facilities? So we decided to use our unrestricted for those two facilities that are in Frankfurt. But like I said, it was the collaboration. It was everybody working together. Laura might know something that I wouldn't know. Community Corrections might know about a need that I didn't know. But we all sat down, came to the table. We didn't have any problems at all, did we? Everybody was there for the same purpose. We have the same passion. We have a great recovery community in Clinton County and Frankfurt, and we're proud of that, and we want to be known for that we genuinely care for our people. So I'm excited about this. When we first got it, it was kind of like, we don't know where to go from here, what to do, but once they formed that committee, it really worked out great.
As the fiscal body for the county, sometimes we fall into the trap of seeing the entire world with dollar signs and numbers, and you forget that there's people behind all of those departments and all of those line items in a budget. Opioid abuse and addiction, as it relates to the county, and I don't mean to be flippant with this, but it's an analogy I can think of. It's a little bit like gravity. We know it's there, but we can't see it. It's hard to put a dollar figure to it. But we know there's an impact on our EMS system. We know there's an impact on our jail system. We know there's an impact on the court system. And the irony is that as those impacts mount and the costs go up, Dan, we talked earlier before the meeting, you know, that the state right now has a very strong budget position, but at many counties, that's not the case. Budgets are very tight. And so as our costs related to the impacts of opioid abuse mounted, we had less resources available to try to deal with the root causes. And so that's why the timing and the presence of these funds was so critical to us, and why our council embraced the work of this group, you know, so passionately. We immediately agreed that not just the restricted funds, but all funds should go towards treating the root causes of opioid abuse and trying to correct those impacts. And I wanted to go even one step further, and I challenged Laura and our group, you know, try to find a way to take these monies and leverage them even further. You know, let's go get more grant money. Let's try to really do what we can at the most basic level. You know, the mayor and Commissioner Brewer, as the executives for their respective bodies, they administer the departments that have to deal with this. Laura, in her role, deals with the individuals that have to deal with this. So our role is to be that support agency that says, we'll get you the money, you go do the work and do the best that you can. So we as the city, as our colleagues in the city did, we were unanimous in our support. We were unanimous in our feeling that we should put all available settlement funds towards opioid abuse treatment and services, and then again encouraged our group to continue working to try to leverage those for even more dollars.
As an elected official, I think sometimes the best thing we can do is get out of our own way. And so to me, what holds this whole thing together is Laura and having someone in our community. So for anyone that will watch this or is watching it currently of other counties, that is the most important piece. Is it's not the elected officials that make this happen. You have to have organizations in your community that are doing the groundwork and doing it on a daily basis like Laura, and that is what has made this most successful for Clinton County and Frankfurt. The one last thing I'd like to mention is that what we're trying to do going forward, since this extends out through 2038 and elected officials do change positions, is create an ordinance so this committee is established in our community, and then have MOUs that each entity that receives funds has to fill out on an annual basis so that we can track and have accountability for where those funds are going. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we all do, and we'll open it up for any questions if there are.
Dr. Box.
I'm absolutely blown away. This is incredible, and this is exactly what public health is, what you guys have put together. It's exactly what the Governor's Public Health Commission has pushed so hard for, to be able to give more funding to our counties and to our local communities so that they can do exactly what you guys are doing. And if there's not a Laura, hopefully there's someone in the Public Health Department to bring all these people. What you've said today, convening, conversation and collaboration, preventing the duplication of services and bringing those services together and letting everybody know about those services are exactly the things that, as I've gone around the state, I've seen needed to happen so much. And prevention, the importance of, okay, rather than continuing to put more and more and more money here to treat these issues, let's get on the front end of this and figure out if we can give some support to these children that we know are at risk to become people who hurt themselves or people who hurt others, whether that's through substance use abuse or something else. And then the fact that you're going to put this in ordinance so that going forward, no matter who those elected officials are, this same base team or your people who follow you will be there to address whatever the public health issue is. And that is exactly the goal of the Governor's Public Health Commission. So congratulations, and I hope we're going to be able to, I know we're going to be able to get you more funds to continue to work on other things.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your collaboration. It really is a successful journey that you've been on, so I commend you for that. Two questions I have for you. The first one is, would you do anything differently in terms of the work that you put in, based upon your experience so far? Is there anything that really didn't work? We had to change that, we had to pivot there. And then the second question, on page 3 of your handout, your breakdown there, I noted that for the county distribution portion of the funds, $59,000 out of the $103,050 is allocated to probation for prevention programs. And I thought that was a little bit, when I first saw that, it's kind of a eureka for me in terms of dealing with probation. Most folks don't typically associate probation with prevention as probation deals with folks on the backside. So I'm curious as to that significant allocation to probation and what the specific programs are, or what the expectations are.
So, believe it or not, our probation is very involved on the prevention side. Nancy Ward is the head of our probation department, and actually, she is the grant keeper for our peer recovery coach program. And she has great insight. She knows that people would not want to come to peer recovery at probation, that they would see that as not a trusting place to go. So it's housed at Healthy Communities. She pays for that program. And she also pays for a lot of prevention work that Healthy Communities does. So we do like men's recovery cafes, and the probation department pays for those. We have family recovery nights where we do those every single month. We usually have over 100 people in attendance. We do things like they come together, we have a meal. On the tables are prompt questions. It seems like common sense to you and me that you know what to talk to with your kids at the supper table, but for a lot of our people that they don't understand what they should talk to about their kids. So it's things like, what's your favorite Christmas tradition? What would you like to make a Christmas tradition about? Those were things at our Christmas night, family night. Then we had stations, one where they could sit on Santa's lap and get a family Christmas picture, write letters to Santa, decorate a stocking to take home, make a family ornament. And then we had all these stations they could go to, making memories with their families to replace either memories to make memories or to replace bad ones. This year at the Christmas, I had a little girl come up and she gave me a hug and she said, "Thank you so much. We didn't have Christmas last year because Daddy was in jail." And I said, "You are so welcome. I'm so glad you're having a good Christmas." Those are the things that make a difference. That's why I do what I do, and our probation department funds a lot of those kind of programs. And I know that does seem weird, but our probation department actually does a lot on our prevention side. So they also run our partnership for a drug-free Clinton County Drug and Alcohol Coalition. They're the entity that oversees our Drug and Alcohol Coalition. So that's, so when you see the PDFCC and it says probation, they oversee our Drug and Alcohol Coalition. So that funding is in there to help other smaller organizations be able to apply for money through this for abatement strategies.
Thank you.
Dan, I had the distinct pleasure of visiting Clinton County. And I'd like to point out that on slide 2, they had their first meeting on November 1st. Today is what, February 3rd? That was just like yesterday. So I'd add to the list of things that Dr. Box mentioned is data-driven decision-making and evidence-based outcomes are not that hard if you'll do what these folks did, and that is look at the data, find the evidence, and then act on it. So I would just encourage Dr. Box, this is a story that is powerful and can teach other counties that it ain't hard to do this. So my learning, spending a day and a half there and visiting all the places that they just mentioned here, is that the secret sauce is sitting right here. And it's not sitting on this side of the table, it's sitting on that side of the table. So I'd say to the three political leaders, you said your job is to get out of the way and provide the funding. Well, you know what? That's kind of our job too at the state level, is to provide the funding and just get out of the way, because you can do it. So I just say kudos and congratulations to all of you. And it just is fortuitous, as Doug knows, that I went there a few months ago, just fortuitous. My family, my mom's family is from Clinton County, so that was the main reason I was going, but it bowled me over. The data-driven decision-making and the evidence-based actions, pretty simple. And the data are already there, like the first responders know where the 911 calls come from. It's that little dollar on your phone bill, right? That's for geocoding it so they know where they are. But then the lock boxes are located inside locked doors and lobbies and things like that. So, so that's it.
Just a quick comment. Just as you've been able to develop collaborations locally and leverage local resources, feel free to reach out to us to help leverage state resources. So as you've talked, and you may have already intersected, we have programs in Medicaid that help serve pregnant women with substance use disorder. We have programs like My Healthy Baby that will come to folks' homes, SNAP, TANF, 211, housing, all of that is here at the table. So also feel free to reach out to us to help leverage, because as we know, it can be difficult to navigate those services, so we're here to collaborate with you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we use lots of that stuff all the time.
Of course you do.
And I wanted to answer the rest of your question. I don't know that I think we would do anything different, maybe start a little sooner, just because it was a lot to do in a short amount of time. That would probably be my only thing I would say, is start a little sooner. I won't lie, they both farm, my husband farms, so we live by the farm season, and I don't mean, winter, spring, summer, fall. I mean planting, spraying, harvesting, and hauling, and so we got a little bit of a late start. So I would say that would be my only thing, is we would have started a little sooner, just because it was a lot to do in a short amount of time. So that
Laura,
would be my only thing.
could you have completed this in 30 days or less than 30 days if you were forced to?
If we were forced to, and if we were forced to and had no other job responsibilities,
Okay.
yes.
Just
Yeah, but on top of other job responsibilities, it would have been a lot. And everybody on that committee had other job responsibilities, so, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I had a call with somebody who heard us talking on one of the RFA calls, who called me this week and wanted to know how we did things. And my advice to her was slow your roll. It was like, do it right. There's other money coming. Slow your roll. Do it right. It will be worth your effort to slow down and do it right. Because if you're going to do a community's needs assessment, you need to do it right, and it will be worth it. So And I feel like we did that. I mean, I feel like we did a very good job at seeing what our needs were and what the barriers were. And, you know, some of those barriers you don't see. And talking to your consumer, I guess that's something I didn't bring up. You know, we talk to the consumers. You know, we have close to 200 people on peer recovery coach services. I went to support groups and I asked people, what are your barriers? You know, tell me what barriers to services there are, and listen to the people who use the services. I don't use the services, so I'm not the person to say what the barriers to service are. You have to talk to the people using the services to find out what the barriers to services are. So talking to the people who use the services to find out what barriers are, that's important. You know, and having my staff we have a high Latino population, so having my Latino Spanish-speaking staff speak to my Latino Spanish-speaking population to find out what their barriers are, that's super important. You know, it's not fair for me where I'm at to say what barriers are to people who are not where I'm at, so.
Excellent advice. Terry?
Just real quickly, our county office for DCS is in Frankfurt, and so I'm excited about the implications and how this can positively impact families that I'm sure potentially cross over. So kudos to the work that you're doing. I'd like to echo what Dan said, is that we also have prevention programs that we could possibly work together with to help serve families, to help prevent entry into the child welfare system or help them exit safely out of the child welfare system. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Devin?
Thank you very much. Devin McDonald with the Criminal Justice Institute. So I just wanted to highlight that a lot of the folks and members that she said worked on this panel are also members of the local coordinating council within Clinton County. The Drug and Alcohol Coalition is the local coordinating council for Clinton County. So really excited to hear that those individuals were part of your program and part of your plan for this money, and just echo that, you know, that's a good framework that maybe that LCC could share with others around the state to truly put these dollars to the best use, and that those LCCs really are valuable resources within the counties, because all those members that you talk about, you know, the mental health, the substance abuse programs and things like that, probation, law enforcement, courts, whatever, they're all involved in the local coordinating councils around the state. So just echo that, and great work. So thank you.
I can't speak high enough about all of those entities. And, you know, this groundwork was laid long before all of this. And, you know, we have law enforcement working mobile food pantries with our people in recovery, you know, and learning about repairing relationships and them trusting law enforcement. And it's important for law enforcement to have a relationship with the people in recovery that doesn't have anything to do with them arresting them. And, you know, I love it. I had actually an FPD officer stop by the office and said, hey, I haven't seen in a while. Are they okay? I said, yeah, they're okay. They're in recovery. That's what I want to happen.
That's
You know?
hopefully the way it should be. Yeah.
That's the way it should be. He said, it's okay. I just wanted to check. And I'm like, yeah, they're good. They're living in recovery. That's why you haven't heard from them, you know. And they were like, all right, I just wanted to check, make sure they were all right. You know, that's what I love. And our community is that way. Our head of community corrections goes to our Brianna's Hope meeting almost every Thursday night. He donated Pacer tickets on, I think, New Year's Eve, and took some of the people from Brianna's Hope down there to a Pacers game. And so this is a community thing, and I couldn't be prouder, honestly, to live where I live.
He was asking if we had any problems or situations as we were going through it. I don't think we did. I think it was a great group. I think we brought the right people to the table, and I think that's the important thing. And there was nobody there that said, oh, we want this and they don't need that, did they? I mean, it was like, how can we all do this together to make it work for all of us? And I think that's what's really important, is that we're all able to work together and figure out, I don't even remember what it was, but there was something brought up, and we said, do we need that? And they said, oh, no, we can get that through a grant, or we can get that through another way, so we don't need to use these funds for this. I mean, this is the way we talk during those meetings, is how can we use all of our other avenues as well as these funds? So I think the big thing is getting the right people to the table and, you know, willing to work with the others and doing what's best for the community.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope that other communities across the state will look at the example that you've set and follow. And I have a feeling that your phones will probably be ringing in the weeks to come with people asking for advice. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So one of the core strategies outlined in the allowable uses of the National Opioid Settlement Agreement is prevention programming. And over the last 4 years, the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation has committed $15 million in evidence-based prevention programming at more than 150 Marion County schools through its Prevention Matters grant. These proven programs equip students with skills that not only help them to avoid drugs and alcohol, but also help improve their academic achievement, attendance, classroom behavior, and well-being. We've invited Sarah Hawkins, Dr. Whitesell of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation to share their findings after 4 years of the grant program, which has already been replicated across the state. Joining them is also Stephen Baer, the Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction at the Beech Grove City Schools, to share the impact of Prevention Matters on his students. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Hello, everyone. My name's Sarah Hawkins. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. We really appreciate you inviting us to be here today to have a conversation about school-based prevention programs. Today, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Fairbanks Foundation, we'll just orient you to our organization and our interest in substance use disorder and school-based prevention, and then give you some highlights of our Prevention Matters program and the lessons that we've learned about program impact, what successful implementation looks like, and how we're going to continue to sustain this work now that the grant funding has ended. And then, as Doug said, we're really delighted to have Steve Baer from Beech Grove City Schools here with us to share his experience leading this work on the ground as well. Feel free to stop us at any point with any questions along the way, and we'll also be happy to answer questions at the end. So the Fairbanks Foundation, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a private independent foundation based here in Marion County. We have 3 focus areas: education, health, and the vitality of Indianapolis. And across those 3 focus areas, we do grant making, we fund research and evaluations, and we collaborate, in fact, with many of you in this room across our focus areas. In health, our goals are specifically to prevent and address substance use disorder, to promote lifelong recovery. And then, although tobacco use really is a form of substance use disorder, we have a goal specific to tobacco use. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the increase of e-cigarettes, really is leading to a lot of misuse of other substances as well. To achieve our health goals, we collaborate with Doug's team, with a number of other state agencies to raise awareness of evidence-based prevention, harm reduction, and treatment programs. We support grantees that are doing work across the continuum of care, and we fund research. Our board first adopted a goal to address opioid use disorder in 2015. And to help guide our work in that area, we commissioned some research to understand the landscape of prevention and treatment programs and identify where there were gaps both in Marion County and in the state where we could direct our resources. And at that time, there was a real growing body of research about evidence-based prevention programs in schools. We also learned that only 11% of Marion County schools were implementing one of these evidence-based programs. A number of schools were implementing other prevention programs, but didn't understand there's a difference between effective programs with an evidence basis or not. Schools also may not have been doing these programs because we know that they're tasked with many things and have limited time and financial resources to do things beyond their core academic subjects. So in 2018, as Doug mentioned, we launched Prevention Matters. At that time, we launched it as a 3-year, $12 million initiative. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, our board wound up extending that funding by an additional year, an additional $3 million. These funds were used to support schools in identifying, implementing, or sustaining one of 25 approved evidence-based programs. As Doug mentioned, at their core, these are really programs that are giving students protective factors like communication skills, conflict resolution skills, decision-making skills that help them avoid substance use at later ages. Our grant funding has supported 27 Marion County school organizations, districts, charter networks, or private schools that represent over 150 schools themselves. And across these schools, they are delivering evidence-based prevention programs to more than 82,000 Marion County students every year. In addition to the funding that we provided to schools, we commissioned a technical assistance provider that has expertise in school-based substance use prevention programs to really guide schools on effective implementation. We know that to have the right effect, the programs have to be delivered properly. And then we commissioned a third-party evaluation through RTI. So with that background, I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Dr. Emlyn Weitzel, who will share some of the lessons that we've learned.
Thanks, Sarah. So before I dive into specific results, I just want to take a moment to orient you all to how we think about impact. How are we going to know if these programs are working, given we're trying to prevent substance use in the future, often long-term in the future. So that's our ultimate goal, preventing the substance use. But what can we look at now to determine whether kids are on track toward reducing their substance use in the future? This is where it's really important that we are using only evidence-based programs that have been shown through much prior research to prevent substance use or to help kids develop those protective factors Sarah mentioned that through research have been shown to reduce substance use in the future. So we really need to think about kind of three key phases. First, on the left in green in your slides, you see, are grantees implementing programs as designed? So we'll say with fidelity, are they just being delivered as designed by the program developers? Because again, the research base demonstrates they need to be implemented with fidelity to have these impacts. Next, we look at these intermediate student outcomes. These are those shorter term things that can tell us whether kids are on track toward reducing substance use in the future. Those protective factors like communication skills, self-regulation. Turning to actual results from the evaluation, RTI used data from a variety of data sources that all pointed towards strong implementation. So we'll talk about implementers. Implementers, just think teachers. For the most part, these are teachers, the classroom teachers. They're the adults delivering programming to kids every day. But sometimes they're school counselors or other school staff. So we just say implementers to be a little more inclusive. So based on implementer surveys, observations conducted by the evaluators, and then student pre-tests and post-tests, we learned that implementers were delivering all the lessons required. They were delivering them, aligned with the program materials. Students were engaged with the programs, and we do have evidence they actually understood the material and were developing these skills. From that effective implementation, we at the foundation learned several lessons about what it takes to have strong implementation that maximizes impacts on students. So first up here, program match matters. Sarah said there was a list of 25 approved programs. So how is a school supposed to pick the one that's going to work best for their kids? This is something that our grantees worked with the technical assistance provider on. They were guided through the process of identifying their specific student population's needs through data, and then determining which program or programs, some grantees implemented more than one, would meet those needs while also fitting into the school day. Like, will it work with your school schedule? That's also really important if these programs are going to take hold and sustain. Staffing needs to be purposeful and sustainable. This looks different at every grantee. As Sarah said, we have some single-site school grantees and some very large districts. So those staffing models are going to be really different, but the key factor was that an implementation team is really important. So it shouldn't just be one person trying to maintain a program in their school, but a team is very helpful, and that also helps guard against challenges related to turnover, which is something that will just occur in schools. Training is critical. This seems obvious. Implementers certainly need to be trained when they're going to be developing or implementing a new program to them, but also we found that grantees did really well when they provided ongoing training. So annual booster training, perhaps at summer PD, or ongoing professional development and collaboration opportunities throughout the year. Next up, various monitoring activities were shown in the evaluation to be predictive of stronger implementation quality and student understanding. So this just means, schools have a plan for what they're supposed to be doing. There's a schedule laid out. Teachers are tracking whether they are delivering all the lessons required. Someone is looking at that data. Someone is observing those classrooms and providing feedback to the implementers. So that cycle really contributed to stronger implementation and more positive student outcomes. And again, that's something that grantees worked closely with TA providers on to figure out how that could work best in their schools with their staff. And then finally, we've said already several times, implementation with fidelity is critical. There's a little bit of a balance with schools needing to make some adaptations that can help improve student engagement. So we are not the experts on what types of adaptations those should be or what would be best for a school. Again, our schools worked closely with TA providers to figure out what those small tweaks would be. They need to maintain the critical elements of the program, but they can do things like add additional examples that will be more relevant to their student body, or repeat lessons if it's clear students didn't really understand it all the first time. So going back to our impact model here, we had strong program implementation with fidelity, which is wonderful, and we did also see in the evaluation that there's evidence that kids are developing these important competencies and protective factors. So from student surveys and implementer surveys, we found that students did have improved social emotional competency, self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, interpersonal skills, and those types of outcomes. Which again, it's too soon to measure these longer-term impacts on ultimate substance use, but we're confident based on results from these first two stages, kids are on track toward reduced substance use in the future.
So as I said early on, one of our goals was to make sure that schools were well-positioned to sustain this work without our ongoing funding. And we are thrilled that after 4 years of funding, 25 of our 27 grantees have committed to continued implementation. We really attribute that success to well-rounded sustainability plans that included not only funding sources, but also ensuring that the programs were really integrated into the school culture. And one of the ways of doing that is maintaining strong stakeholder buy-in throughout the initiative. Our grant funding proved to be really helpful to schools in their initial launch stages. The most expensive aspect of implementation is purchasing the material, maintaining a license, as well as training your staff. And many of our schools expanded their staff capacity by even hiring, maybe a director of programming or, some other administrative role. But then they've found ways to sustain that work using absorbing it into their operating funds, using textbook fees, or Title I and Title IV funding. A number of grantees also in the final year of their grant funding purchased multiple years worth of materials to give them sort of an on-ramp to that sustained funding. But really of equal importance is integrating this program into the school culture. A number of schools found success even adjusting their daily class schedule to make sure that there is a dedicated time every day for this core curriculum. It can fit into advisory or homeroom, whereas other schools may have incorporated it into their health curriculum. And also, Emmy talked about training. Many schools have an annual professional development calendar and made sure to incorporate implementer training as one of their annual professional development sessions. We also saw schools that trained not only their implementers, but their entire school staff, so that they adopted kind of a common language to help students resolve conflicts or work through a difficult situation that really embeds the nature of the program into their daily school culture. And then finally, we know that schools have a number of things that they're responsible for, especially as we've read about the learning loss that students have suffered due to the pandemic. And so maintaining that stakeholder administrator buy-in and support for these programs is of critical importance. And schools that collected data and reported even anecdotal stories of success to their superintendents and their school boards were among those that were most successful at maintaining that buy-in. So with those lessons to share, we are so thrilled that Dr. Bear is here to talk about what this actually looked like in Beech Grove City Schools.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us. Appreciate it. I want to go back real quick to just this pie-shaped diagram that Sarah had here. One of the things, these were kind of the three key components that allow us to continue our programming after our grant funding's done. It's been a blessing to have the Fairbanks Foundation support us with that large grant, and it really allowed us the time, the training, and that evidence-based program to really look over our entire curriculum and feel how it can best support our kids. So when we talk about program integration, this was kind of a neat part about our program that kind of changed as we move forward. It's kind of interesting as my wife is a 6th grade teacher in our district, and also, so I'm her boss at work and she's mine at home. That's kind of how it works. But I'd kind of get an extra insight from her too on how things were working and what she liked and what she struggled with, et cetera. So it was kind of a neat opportunity that I had kind of in dealing with this over the 4 years. But with that, we did start with like a total school approach. Every teacher taught this. But as you know, with some of the struggles that we have with turnover in education, we were spending a lot of money on training. And so we decided to simplify it a little bit, and we went to a more like health-based approach where we had our health teacher do it, and that's been very consistent. And what we did is we kept those implementers. We took 3 of them, or several of them at each grade, like one at each grade level, to be kind of that liaison, to help plan, to help coordinate, to always be there to train or help train if we had somebody new come on board. So that really seemed to work well as opposed to having constant turnover and having to retrain everybody. So in terms of program integration, I think that's been very positive as we've moved forward over the 4 years. In terms of stakeholder engagement, if you happen to know, being so close to State House of Beech Grove and our community, we have an incredible relationship with our mayor and with our drug coalition, the Beech Grove Drug Coalition. And so from stakeholders, it's from the mayor down to our drug coalition, to Dr. Hammock, our superintendent, to myself, and all the way down to our teachers and kids. It's been a community-wide event, and that's probably been the reason that this is going to continue. They have assured us that they're going to help with the funding of the curriculum through fundraising and events that they do within the community. So, we believe using that money from our education fund and to support this, but it's nice to get that help from your community partners also. And then, so that's kind of where the financial planning comes in. And like Sarah said, I did load up on some curriculum in the last year of the grant also. COVID made it very difficult to get training. You didn't need as much curriculum, so there was extra money at the end. So we bought some of those extra workbooks and things so that we're ready to go for another year or so as we move forward. But on to kind of why it works in Beech Grove. My teachers, when I talked to them, one of the things that we did to make this successful is that we had summer trainings. We let all of our teachers and those support people come in and meet and just talk about how are we going to make this better. As you know, if you've ever had 30 kids in your class or 30 kids in your home, you've got to keep them engaged and motivated. And so we did a lot of communicating and, like what's working, and it was nice to have that feedback. But what they said they liked the most was the self-esteem. It really starts off with the idea that teaching these kids that everybody has the ability to succeed. Doesn't matter, where your parents are in their life or where maybe a brother and sister is in their life or whatever, you have that ability to succeed. when you think about why people do drugs, it's usually due to a lack of self-esteem, self-confidence, or other major issue in their life that they're struggling with. So the reason that we chose Botfin Life Skills for our grade 3 to 8 program is because it has that life skills training. So it uses all those interesting things to explain to kids why are we more likely to do drugs or struggle with alcohol, vaping, etc., because of what we're exposed to. So if you can kind of see in the handout there, this is kind of an idea of what a basic lesson might look like. It follows the prevention programming to a T, but we do add those little pieces into it. But this is just something that kind of just explains, the reasoning. Talking about kids, we talked about brain development. Why are you as kids being targeted? How are you being targeted as a child? And so you really explain to them, as a consumer, what's happening from the media. And so it goes into just don't do drugs. That's, every kid hears that, but, really talk about how the brain works and, when you don't be tricked by the media and, to start making poor decisions. So, it's very interesting, and the kids really enjoyed it. My wife was incredibly disappointed when I had her not teach it anymore. That was probably her favorite piece. She, along with the kids, as it talks about, were incredibly enthusiastic because it does talk about external factors. And this is kind of one of the first points in kind of our curriculum where kids are starting to understand about advertising, social media, et cetera, when you're in that 4th grade, et cetera. So it's kind of a neat thing to see kids and how they respond to that. Also, most importantly, as was explained earlier by Sarah, it is an evidence-based program. So oftentimes it's very difficult to, have that data about kids and are they really truly not taking drugs or are we preventing them? But the data indicates, it shows through their skills and habits that they're learning that they are going to be able to make some of those harder decisions. So, that's one of the things that we can measure is that self-confidence, that self-esteem, et cetera. And hopefully that leads to making good decisions and saying no when that peer pressure comes or that advertising or media tries to trick you into making a poor decision. Another thing that we really liked about the evidence-based programming was perceptions. Many of our kids perceived that more kids were doing drugs than they actually were. One of the things we talk about is what percentage do you think is, partaking in illegal drugs or making poor decisions with vaping, et cetera. And what's nice about this is that it's definitely grade level specific. It's a nice curriculum that it's grade level appropriate. So, and a lot of kids thought, 60 to 70% of my peers are. But in reality, it was more like a 10 to 20% or lower, So it was really eye-opening to these students to see and understand reality a little bit. Because as you know, with social media and peer groups, that it does feel overwhelming at times and feels like everybody else is doing, which is one of the reasons why poor decisions are made by kids. So several of the students would also talk to our teachers and say, I'm trying to get my parents to stop. I'm trying to get stopping vaping, et cetera. So, that's when you see what the impact is having is not only when they internalize it, but when they start to have those same conversations with their parents. So that's why we were so excited about kind of that 3 through 8 programming with Botfin, life skills, and what we feel is definitely an evidence-based impact on our students and the prevention programming. Finally, from a grade 9 to 12 level, we did choose Too Good for Drugs. And I was not in the position to make these decisions at the beginning. It was with an overall, our team worked with the technical coordinator to determine, based on scheduling, how many programs are there, how long does it kind of take each day, et cetera, to determine which program was most beneficial. But I know 2 of the major components that our team liked about the programming with Too Good for Drugs is that, again, it was skill developed. It didn't just talk about don't do drugs. It really had that goal setting, decision making, understanding the emotions behind decision making, and also really providing drug information and application through role playing and different activities. You know, a 9 through 12 grader is just like a kindergartner. They like to be engaged, they like to be motivated, they like hands-on, they like games, they like stickers, they like everything that a kindergartner does. So, you know, and so we've really found that that's been beneficial. As the data indicated, the reduction of students who intended to drink and smoke was seen. It also indicated, as Botfin, that students increase their self-esteem and confidence. Again, those keys to making good decisions. We did teach it in our health class. Our junior ROTC program also did the programming. We tried to get as many of our 9 to 12th graders exposed to this as possible. And we probably had almost 800 of our 1,000 kids be exposed to Too Good for Drugs training. So, you know, we're really proud of that. One of the things that you start to see in the secondary more heavily is students wanting to make an impact and do things on their own. And that's, they worked with our principal. They wanted to do something different with tobacco and vaping and things of that nature. And so we did, based on our connection with the Drug Coalition, we came up with some new consequences for tobacco use and vaping. And we have a program in which the first time they're caught, they have two choices. They can either pay a $175 fine through the police department and our SRO, or go to 4 trainings. So over 4 years, we probably had 180 scenarios, and about 179 of them took the four-day programming. Yeah. So many of those kids continued to come to those meetings even after their consequence was over. Our Drug Coalition has some very vast array of, people with different attitudes, different passions. So we had kind of a millennial who loved our kids and just came in and volunteered. And then, if you know Diana Hendricks, who's one of our huge coalition members in Beech Grove, she runs that coalition. And Diana and this young lady would come in and meet with our kids in the morning or after school for their consequence, and just really built a team. And it's just been really very positive program. And from that, they developed kind of a youth leadership prevention program in the building also that the kids run. And they just it's a bi-weekly meeting, and they put up posters. They, kind of have a program, long-range plan in which they continue that prevention matter year-round. It's not just a week, a month. It's just a sustained program throughout the year, and it's kids wanting to do it on their own. So extremely excited about that. And, prevention programming is not just a one-time thing. It's, it's a year-round process, and we feel like with the support of our community and our kids that it's starting to really be embedded in our program, and we're really excited about continuing it as the Fairbanks grant and funding kind of falls off the table. So Beech Grove is ready to continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. So just a last slide for you all here. Our foundation has a real commitment to sharing our lessons learned across all of our work, but that's particularly true with this initiative. This is the largest single grant-making initiative that the foundation has ever done. The year after we launched it, we actually had 2 other foundations here in the state that approached us to ask how we set it up, and said they wanted to launch similar grant initiatives in their communities to support evidence-based prevention programs. And so those 2 organizations did essentially launch their own version of Prevention Matters, working with the same technical assistance providers, the same evaluation firm, and we've shared a lot of learnings along the way. We also have a great relationship with the Department of Education. They, in partnership with DMHA, lead a program called Project Aware to help schools implement kind of a broader student mental well-being program. And this summer, DOE and the Fairbanks Foundation are co-convening a statewide summit for Indiana schools about evidence-based student mental well-being and prevention programs. And then, of course, we couldn't do any of this work without our ongoing relationship with Doug and Shelby and their team. And we are happy to continue to find ways to collaborate and support the commission's goals and objectives. So again, just really want to thank you for the chance to be here with you today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Dan?
I don't know what slide number it is for you, but for us, it's page 16 on the left corner and page 8 in the right corner. It's the slide with the 3 columns that you went through one at a time.
Yep.
And the center column has the words implementers felt programs had a positive impact on self-awareness, self-regulation, and social skills, which you spoke about. And the last column says prevent substance use too soon to measure. So I wonder if you have an opinion about how long it will take, and let me finish, and what domains of data you require in order to answer that question, because that's the typical answer, and I've been directly involved in this work since 1973, and that's always been the answer. And I just wonder, as we're accreting more data, if we have more informed opinions about what more we need to collect. And here's what I'm specifically thinking about. You're helping kids with their self-awareness, self-regulation, and social skills. That should survive into adulthood. So do we need to measure data, collect data longitudinally for a longer period of time so we have some idea if what we're doing now is sustainable on an individual basis?
Absolutely. So I'm our foundation's research person, so my answer is always yes, we need more data, we need to track people over time, yes.
Well, as you well know, I've had a lot of experience with people just like that.
So I think that's the key issue. I think you would start to see improvements in some of these substance use measures or attitudes or, actual substance use behaviors. Adolescence, young adulthood, ongoing. The challenge really is tracking students, as you say, and having good measures of did this student who participated in Prevention Matters in grades 3 through 6, 5 years from then, sure, we could potentially measure impacts on some of these measures in high school. It's a challenge with data collection and tracking and resources related to that. So yes, we need more data. It's a real challenge to follow kids long-term and to connect all these different data systems to do that.
The one other thing that I'll add is the pandemic certainly makes it hard to make sense of all of the data, both from the standpoint that, what are improvements in attendance or improvements in reductions in the number of disciplinary infractions when you have kids learning from home. So the data throughout the course of the 4 years is really complicated. But what I will tell you is that the challenges that schools experienced with their students when they returned to, post-pandemic, they said, while this is so difficult, we don't know where we would be if we didn't have these programs in place to help us through this situation. So even in places where there weren't positive measures, they anticipate it would have been so much worse absent of these programs.
I got an idea for you. Fairbanks Foundation funded at the beginning of the pandemic Fairbanks School of Public Health to use the state tax records to create a random sample, right, of taxpayers whose address we knew, whose phone number we knew, because we had a lot of data on the tax returns. So people were contacted and asked to take a COVID test. And that disclosed how many asymptomatic positives there were. Why can't we do the same sort of thing? Collect a random sample. We don't have to track everybody. We just have to know what programs actually have efficacy later on in life. That was my question. I'll bet you could find a funder for a research project in this room to do that thing. But I can tell you as an administrator, that's very frustrating. Not to have an idea of what you're investing so much passion in has momentum behind it that you can measure. So, thanks.
Dr. Box?
So great presentation. Thank you so much. And Sarah, I just wondered if you have looked at the cost of providing a program like this per student, because there will be, especially if we get school liaisons from a public health standpoint with every school, a lot of schools interested in doing this and reaching out to you, sir. So thank you for your time and presenting today. But that cost to implement a program like this will be important as they develop a budget.
Yeah, that's a great question. We gave a lot of flexibility to schools to come up with their budgets because we didn't want to prescribe what their staffing model should be or, what, so it's not as simple of a question to answer in terms of what our
Never
grantees
is.
spent. I think the bigger point is to say that it really can be sustained on public funding and that the upfront cost of, curriculum licenses, a lot of the programs now have a digital license where it's as small as, $5,000 per school, or they have tiered, fees depending on how many students are being served. And a lot of the programs also have online training. So the training costs were more a function of if schools were inviting their teachers to come on a Saturday for training that's outside of contract time or, so there are ways with support of technical assistance providers to really bring that cost, down, so.
Do you have budgets from all the different, like you said, 25 different programs? I'm sure, sir, that you have a budget for yours that can even just show a range of
Yes,
costs
and
the
we do,
implementation?
and in fact, the website for all of this information it's rmff.org, which is the Fairbanks Foundation's website, /Prevention Matters, and there is a link to, on that page, of all of the grant recipients and the dollar amounts and programs that they implemented.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Richard and Fairbanks for your partnership in all of this. So,
Thank you.
so finally, I'm going to turn it over to Indiana Criminal Justice Institute Director Devin McDonald for an update.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I know we're reaching the end here, but I am excited to say that over the last 4 years, CJI has worked really, really hard with the counties and the local coordinating councils to get them up online. As of today, we have 91 of 92 active LCCs in the state of Indiana. I can't tell you how many years it's been since we've been at a number that high. So kudos.
Not since I've been here.
And you've been here more than a year, I can tell you that. So kudos to everybody that's involved, not only my staff, but also at the county level. We had multiple counties, especially in northern Indiana, certain sections of northern Indiana, where we actually had coordinators in one county actually volunteer to say, hey, I know this one's not working. I'll step up and run one in another county. So multiple efforts like that. The networking grant that we had that provided the networking for the LCCs has just been instrumental in helping with all of that. So very happy to report on that. We will have 92 online this year, so super excited for that. So then once we do that, we talked about sustainability here a lot today with varying things. The objective then is sustainability. So I'm happy to hear that there's a lot of buy-in with supporting initiatives that the LCCs are involved in. So very thankful for that as well. To the point that we were talking about with Clinton County and the work of the LCC up there and similar, even with this, the coalition in Beech Grove is similar to other coalitions that we have around the state. So we recently conducted a survey, closed it out. We'll hopefully have data here in the very near future on how the LCCs and other similar situated coalitions, drug coalitions around the state are participating in a lot of this opioid settlement planning and how the counties are using the dollars. So more to come on that as we move forward. Finally, the last little bit that I have is of those 91 active LCCs that we have, 88 have actually submitted all their reports as of right now. So again, that's really high numbers. We're working with the last few to get those in. The 91st is somewhat new, so they're still kind of compiling their reports and getting those in. But again, very happy to hear that we have such high numbers of functioning LCCs around the state, and not only functioning, but active within their communities. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Devin. And thank you to all of our presenters this morning. I appreciate everyone's time and attention. Our next meeting is May 4th at 10 a.m. here in the Indiana State Library History Reference Room 211. At that meeting, we will announce the recipients of the $25 million matching grants, and we'll also hear from a couple of the awardees. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
Good meeting.